Alright, so I tend to be in voice chat general, and I always hear people say, I wish I knew how to mod, but there's just so many videos, and they're really long, and I don't really know which ones to watch. So I'm just going to make one that explains it all, and it's going to be very short, in 15 minutes, that's what I'm saying. So, first of all, to start modding, you need to go to modding how to, check the pinned messages, click this one, and then click on this link here. Now, it kind of gives you like an error, so just backspace a little bit, and there it is. Now you press clone or download, and you press download zip, and once that downloads, you go ahead and extract it to a folder. After that, you search up Unity Hub on Google or Bing apparently, which I didn't know I had it as default browser, and you go to the install page for Unity Hub. Hub in particular is important to do. Once you have Hub open, it looks something like this, and you're gonna go to installs and press add. Now, the proper version to add you can find by just going into modding help or chat with Carl and typing Unity version, and then the bot tells you what you need. So right now we're going to be downloading 2019.2.9, which you'll notice doesn't show up here on its own, but you can go to download archive and find it yourself manually. What did I say? 2.9? 2.9. Here it is. So you just hit the Unity Hub button and it automatically installs. And after that, once you have it downloaded, you go to your Unity Hub and you press add, and you navigate to the SDK that you just downloaded, and then you select BAS Assets Creator and hit select folder. And after that, it opens up a project file that kind of resembles this, but with less stuff. At that point, you kind of want to find your model you like. I tend to go to Sketchfab, and that tends to give me some good stuff. So for this one, I just typed in dagger, hit the downloadable button, and found one I liked. Here it is. Maybe it's somewhere around here. Anyways, you just download it, and you extract the folder, and then you drag it into Unity. And at this point, I'm going to let past me take over the mic. Hit him with it, yo, a dab. Alright, so at this point the timer starts, and the first thing you do is drag in your model. Make sure that it's centered at 0, 0, 0, and just continue doing this from now on. I go ahead and create a new material to apply the textures, and I automatically set the base map to white, and I drag the base map onto the base map slot, the metallic onto metallic slot, the normal map onto the normal slot, and the occlusion onto the occlusion. You fix now on the normal map, and you drag the material onto your mesh. After that, I rotate it 180 degrees just so it's straight up, and that just kind of makes it easier to work with. You unpack the model, and you create a new empty object. You name it what you want the name of the item to be, and you drag your model into it. After that, and at this point I just kind of fine-tune the metallicness of the item. After that, you go to your overarching game object, and you type in item definition, and you add the component. You change the item ID to that of the dagger, and you make sure that all that stuff is good, I guess. Okay, so you go into scenes, you go into hand poses, you go and make sure that the model of your item is to scale with your average human. Now, these humans are configured to 6 feet tall, so that kind of gives you a good size comparison of how big you want things to be. So you just kind of drag it next to a human and configure the scale of your item accordingly. So we start with 3, but quickly realize that that's a little too big, so we switch to 2. And that looks good. And you delete that scene, and you create a new empty, and you're gonna name this collider blade if you have a bladed thing, and another one called collider blunt, or hill, or whatever you want to call it. Then you go to add a component, you select collider group, and for the blade, you're going to make sure that imbue magic is enabled, but for the hilt, you're going to make sure it's off. Now, create an empty on those collider groups. You can name it whatever you want, and go ahead and add a component. Now you can choose your wide option of colliders. In this case, we're using a box collider. A lot of people are picky about their colliders, but I don't really care about the detail too much, especially not in a speedrun or whatever this is. So I kind of just do really boxy stuffs most of the time. Yeah, make sure it's in the right position, make sure it's the scale, and do the same for the blade. Again, we're just using a box collider, and we're just changing the scale and the position of that component. We're not changing the size of the component itself. In this case, I mean, it depends on your style, but for me, I just like to just change the scale of the component itself, because it's a lot easier to manage in that way. But if you're picky, you can press the little edit collider button and physically change the attributes of that specific component. But I don't like doing that because it's a lot more work than it's worth. Alright, and once that is in the proper place, you're going to click on that little thing and set the materials. For the blade, we went with blade dagger because that is a dagger. And for the hilt, it appears metal, so we're going to go with metal. This is the physics material that dictates the sounds that it makes and basically how it reacts. And you just saw it there, I imbued magic. And now we make a handle definition. So make a new game object, call it handle, add a component called handle. You don't really have to worry about the ID, just make sure that it's facing the right way. Now the way to tell is it's kind of shaped like an upside down L. And if you hold it out in front of you, the L is kind of pointing in the direction of its position. Now we're going to go ahead and create 4 new positions. We're going to put 180 on one, 180 on the other, and then 180 on both, just like that. That dictates the way you can hold the item. And then we're going to go back to our item definition and drag the handle onto the handle points. After that, we're going to create our damagers. So you're going to create one called pierce, and another one called slash, and another called blunt, and go ahead and add your damager definitions to those. Now these damager definitions, they dictate how the weapon interacts with creatures. So go ahead and make sure the collider groups are properly configured. The collider groups are what you previously configured for the colliders, and they're in a group. Now for slash, make sure that it's facing the right direction. This is a double-bladed or double-sided dagger, so we went with forward and backwards. Set the length to something really massive so you can tell which way is the proper orientation, and then set the depth to something really small so it doesn't get stuck in enemies. And with that, you can tell about where the middle is, and you can change the length accordingly to the point where it about encompasses the entirety of the blade. Now for pierce, we're going to drag the damager to the very top and set it to forward. We're going to set the depth to about an appropriate length, just kind of a guess, and we're going to rotate it to the proper position. And if you double click on that button there, you can change its positioning with the actual inputs. And we're going to drag it to the top and kind of just eyeball its position relative to the blade. You kind of want the pierce to be at the very hilt, and make sure the collider groups are properly configured. As for blunt, we're just going to keep the collider group for the hilt, and we're not going to change its position, direction, or its length or pierce, because it is just blunt. And now we're going to the holder point, and this is what dictates when it's on your shoulders or on your hips. And you want the blue arrow to be pointing downwards, so along with the blade, and you also want the green arrow to be pointing outwards. And now as for the preview, we're just going to scale it down a little and we're going to rotate it just so it kind of looks a little fancier in the thing. We're going to put it in the middle so it's properly centered. And the parry point, we move to the center of the blade. That dictates where the enemies should go to attack to parry the weapon for when you attack it. Let's go ahead and create a new folder, name it whatever you want. I like to call it BAS mod, and drag your weapon into that folder. And now click on that, click new, click away, click new again, and then name it something unique. I tend to go for my name followed by the item. So in this case, for you, calling it Basalt Dagger. I'll go ahead and open mod configuration up at the top. You should see Blade and Sorcery as an option on the tab. And then head on over to streaming assets, create a new folder, call it whatever you want, and then copy a manifest from another mod. I have one just kind of standing by. And then you open that with Notepad, and, oh, okay, it's not yet. Okay, then you go to Asset Bundle Builder, you select just the mod that you're trying to build, you select its folder, and then you make sure that checkbox is ticked, and then you press Build Asset Bundle. Then you go to your manifest and you change its name appropriately, and you also change its description. I didn't do so because I was in a rush. Then you go to default and you select items, and you select an item that's most like your weapon. Now in this case I chose dagger 1 because it is a dagger, and I had to do very little configuration for that. So you copy it, you go back to your mod folder, you rename it to your weapon in particular, and then you head inside the and then I made sure that that was actually going because I noticed that it wasn't. So then you go inside of the item, you change its ID to something unique. That's very important. Localization ID, don't know what it does, I leave it blank. Display name, that is what it's called in the book. Description, speaks for itself. Change the author to yourself. Make sure purchasable is set to true. Slot is what dictates its position on your holsters. And as for the prefab name, put the @ symbol and then the name of your prefab, which you can see in the bottom right of Unity, followed by a colon and the name of the original game object, followed by prefab. You might want to go backwards for that. Alright, so this part is actually the most complicated, so I'm going to go into a bit more detail about this. In particular, we have Snap Dagger, which is kind of the sound effect that it plays. We also have the prefab name, which is, like I mentioned earlier, the little thing in the bottom right of Unity, followed by the name of the game object. So for this, it's the name of the game object is Dagger, and the name of the asset bundle is Basalt Dagger. Now, we also have the damagers. Now, it has to be in this specific order, Pierce/Blunt. So these damager IDs, you can change these if you so wish. You can find the damagers in the default folder. Let me just navigate to that real quick and just demonstrate that you can change them. Here they are. So just find one that's like it, and you can change like the damage and stuff like that. So these transform names, that's the name of these objects in Unity. Oh, and you also have to change the storage category. In this case, it was already daggers, but you can set it to whatever. It's just based off the names that are already in game. Now, at this point, I'm just waiting for the timer to run out, or the bundle to build. So I feel like I completed that in under 10 minutes because the next 30 seconds are completely out of my control. But regardless of that, we still have to wait. And there we go. Just like that, you complete a mod in 10 minutes. Now you're going to want to go ahead and test it in game. Now for the book, first things first, I forgot to 1. Set a fly definition, and 2. Make it so blood can be splattered. Plus it's a little small, but no big deal. We can change that easily. So for the pierced, or the fly ref, that's what dictates its fly. You just drag the pierced damager onto the item definition for fly direction. And for blood, you just go to the mesh and you add the paintable script as a new component. Then you delete the prefab that you previously added, and then you drag the new modified version back and set its asset bundle in place, and then rebuild it. this should take considerably less time than the first time. Just like that, it's done. And we're going to test it out now. So at this point, it is fully completed. It tends not to work on the very first time. No mod really does. But, so don't be afraid to go back and change things. Everyone makes mistakes. So if it doesn't work first time, feel free to ask modding help, or even consult modding how-to for some good troubleshooting guides. And yeah, as you can see, it properly flies and it gets blood on it. Plus, I believe I'm about to show off the handles. You can hold it in all sorts of positions, such as downwards. And that just covers it. Thank you guys for watching. This has been the longest I've ever spoken in one go without anybody responding. Hope you enjoyed the video. Hope this is helpful, and hopefully it wasn't too fast. Anyways, just check to make sure I was recording, and thank you for watching.